Hello, people of humanity. And President Trump, if you could hear this, President slash chief. I know you guys know more than me, presidents, but I discerned a way where one way I could discern more than what the presidents have discerned. And I discerned how everyone left out and value changes. When we ignore things when we are young, because the preaching method shows us that it's playing games where we're not going to be able to force, they're putting fake things in databases and they're putting screens of hyper additional apparent, even when real motivations to hide behind with names increasingly from off all natures of location slash S, and then further with the database rolls with that, and then further where the sciences are manifest and or exceptions like homeschool. This is keeping and having kept each age a fact-achieving nature as styles of logic, natures of logic, as identities of order, tactically ulterior from natures. Otherwise, that body is sensed. And that begins with where and how this started, where you guys were child abused. And you were sensed where you and how you had means per nature itself to discern that our founders communicate, and how our founders' communications to us have stayed forsaken. What President slash Chief communicates and what James Madison did, his plan, it communicates for us to appreciate how we could discern a breaching method had been sustained upon differences A through Z since some ancient times. It had forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded roles hyper additional with what no one wanted to have collusions with. But then that's that. So and everyone has additional motivations too. So per the motivations of everyone leaving out, and so by replacing with nature itself and with James Madison and our founders behind him and his plan, communicate to us regarding the breaching method that prevented them free speech, and regarding why and how. Nature itself shows us not to leave out why and how there's a witch trials place, excuse me, next to Web House, right next to right where George Washington, now renamed, the Webb Stevens Museum, but right where George Washington had to come to counter-extort. Not just with that had roles with itself, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, and having been sustained. Right where and how no one fathomed too. All locations slash S they were use slash S of collusions that no one wanted, all locations slash S. And then further with the database locations, and then further with them where and how as campuses that preserved of the republic for which we stand, still criminally foreign impulse abridged, still from off those locations, hyper additional only having been known as what can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract. Syntax in nature, as it would be, properly have been would have properly been appreciated had the science's voices not been hyper additional collusions, forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading nature itself, criminal insidious natures of calmness or aggression, and like regarding what order is value as. Nature itself shows us the identity of there's an order of finite, the smallest finite details that we could appreciate, or the difference of that, or the order of the value of the finite. How is non-distinctly too, per that identity that has us shown. We can only appreciate to an extent all group details and what is active And there are exceptions, exception nature as itself. That which is not us is not those species' bodies, but it is all things anyway. And its appreciation of a special differences too. And we could ignore it, what nature communicates to us. But a special difference is forced from here that way. That's what is demonstrated to us by how species went extinct and how species go extinct. We're not just us when we lose the ability to appreciate the finite. These are all things that communicate to us. Nature show we are shown nature's body itself. Where how we are shown that other species' bodies have quality aspects of nature distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous. Per that which is further / hyper simultaneous, neither them nor us, but all things anyway. And the / because nature is showing us it is functional, how there are distinct, hyper invisible, but still discernible parts of itself that comes simultaneously with the hypersingular part of itself. Again, is that identity of value / value progression, for example, that has us with 2 eyes, while we are shown that fish have 2 eyes. Bugs, it looks like they have 2 eyes. Other species' bodies, in other words. So we're shown this not to show that there's a God with 2 eyes. We're shown that what is distinct, what is non-distinct, and what is simultaneously comes also with the / hyper simultaneous. Where we could see that one identity value / value progression, where we could discern that is us, not us nor them, but it is all things anyway. And its identity relationship to itself. And the value of that is why and how we have 2 eyes. All exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration / us for the same thing. Which is important too, because nature is increasingly teaching us about exceptions and exception nature as itself, as what is not all things, but it is them anyway, as a distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible. This is what we are discerning, where and how we discern the invisible, but still discernible parts of speech, of languages, like subjects, like verbs. This is what we're discerning, where that's the invisible, but still discernible. This is the subjects come with the hyper invisible, but still discernible. Where and how we appreciate the order of the finite details, subjects, individual, and how we could only communicate, really why and how. All countries are locations, only can be operated in locations, areas, and states, and need to have one voice, which is still forced to be groupthink. So there's the illusion of other, and things that pretend to be apparent, to pretend to be debatable that are not. See, the order of the finite is distinct from the order of what is active and what is simultaneous, while it simultaneously is not. But we left and leave out the rest of itself, the identity of value / value progression that could answer all our questions. But it appreciates lists in ways that all the country, the names of the people of the sciences can't afford to have discerned. And the breaching method that already showed the interbranch names and intelligence tied to them. It simultaneously showed they were shown they need to hide lie progressions. They need to hide roles with use / s of predicate acts with facts, self-value. At each age of fact, true nature, where and how, for example. Other things, others ourselves, were our blame for what our founders communicated for us to blame in the human fact, true nature breaching method. How this is gotten away with, and how they adapt when there are exceptions. In other words, a lot of human people have discerned, had used, even if they didn't mention how we have black people's whites of eyes. They are using that to discern how when people speak as the names of the people of the sciences, individually grouped and together, to the difference of that regarding, we'll call it slavery. We know this is inseparable from it. And we know that we have these natural means to discern, being and having been left out, how the Native Americans had sustained against them. What had already been sustained against countries since some ancient times. In other words, everyone's a certain type of victim / hyper victim, not just to the known and to the unknown that's discovered, but to roles with use, like for example, of fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature, all words as they are appreciated, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs, because how it is a difference, it is taking us, is replacing what nature demonstrates to us with its hyper difference. It is what we can what we are discerning where and how we're discerning how and why we have to appreciate more than one. Hyper invisible, but still discernible. Name for a verb. We need more than one. This is what we are being shown with all plural differences, is what is generating them. But the breaching method knew that, says this is how nature communicates with us. And it forced, tricked her, and persuaded, only remembered. Collusion / S, also with the differences of guilt at the sciences locations, databases tied locations. Because even if people don't know about that, it knew nature would continually demonstrate that to us. It means for us to demonstrate that to each other. The offensively foreign and domestic military have been coming and changing and faking what's digitally recorded in audio and video at campuses filmed 24/7. Where and how manifest, where our roles needs, in other words. So a bunch of people tied to intelligence and their roles with, digital, and then their motivations, not legitimate roles with Jensen. I don't know if that's related to the Jensens with Ray Colello and O'Brien family, with all sides of criminal and civil cases through time. Where and how all natures of courts originally instilled, they are used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. All exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration / S of the same thing. It is important where and how they are victims / hyper victims, too, because they jump in and they're searching what we say to fake and change things. They get away with it per their roles, stacking predicate acts with facts in databases and keeping subject treatments anyways. Speaking about crimes, while as predicate acts with facts needs natures and styles of collusion / S, pretending other too, for the breaching method, as the breaching method knew, names at A through Z, everywhere the species body has a country name, it would be above locations, areas, and states, even if they don't refer to it that. Whatever they refer to it, that's locations, areas, and states. They have to use the names A through Z, having been used as systems tactile ulterior from the identity of hyperorder / order. That distinctly too, because it is itself distinctly, it is itself non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, and where and how it is itself juxtaposed with matter, distinctly, non-distinctly from how it is not juxtaposed with matter, and not capable of juxtaposing with it, and simultaneously with the part that is juxtaposing it anyway, where we are quality diffusion, where and how more and more identity of forever nature is being made, and where and how nature itself is demonstrating to us this is not just more probable than what the nature names of people of sciences have been pretending, specifically to keep cover-ups of collusions where and how things are pretended to be debatable that are not. and where and how the motivations of that. Like on a mass scale, people just love the right to lie in the directions to need to hide lies used for with exceptionary faith, and that's increasingly valuing that having been. So there are all kinds of roles with precedents and statutes, readings, originally and still, where they're making subject treatments while being having been used remotely. For example, with the prisons in El Salvador and in America, a Ray Colello and a Joe DeMoro have many involved with the state corrections offices with them. Also, with people with the name that with the cousins they said are shared. They said it was their cousin, Escalora. And these are increasingly people that I never had classes with in my grammar school, who were trying to make fake, who were influenced to pretend other behind my back. Increasingly with people interbranch that are refusing to identify themselves legitimately as their time collusion /S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. And pretending passions, emotions as psychopaths from backgrounds and even online, changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. Collusion with Weathersfield police that attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, now as an adult. Increasingly, people involved with Eric Mendez and his older brother have collusion /S with federal agencies and with judges and prosecutors and their family members and other natures of ties to them involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Fake conversations with me at the police station too, as a kid and as an adult. I weren't at all. In other words. And I wasn't even down there as a kid. And when I went down there, I didn't speak with anyone at all at the Weathersfield Police Station as an adult. And the older Mendez brother pretended I said a sentence to him. And his roles with multiple falsified police reports through time, and for the same arrests with forging and switching names involved, and lying about that. As collusion /S with interbranch switching and names of planting predicate acts, collusion /S with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and their own names and their family members, and the difference of that, the lawyers, the family, and the news at the same time. It's not complicated, it's just extensive. The recorded, confessed, demonstrating, confirming that they pretend not to understand people because they're mentioning extensive things. And when they know that the only reason they're mentioning extensive things is because they're changing and faking our short words while refusing to identify themselves legitimately into branch. So there are names with Syria that are a certain type of victim. In other words, too, with probate court judges involved with families near me that involved with names next to them, who also had roles of predicate acts with facts, repeating fake things about others they don't even know at campuses they went to. This is how they get away with preventing people from speaking about the past, honestly. And in other words, if they do, they're saying, including regarding how they're clearer than day, the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, while being a landscape theater, not fathoming how the breaching method used and uses all locations /S everywhere the human species body has a body, and uses differences and an appreciation of those differences regarding if it's self-value because people like it, because this is my group. That's exploited. The difference of that is used remotely by the Greek breaching method too. That needs all apparent other roles. Why? Its name as a scientific value is inseparable from proper subject treatments with such critical things, like with the international. In other words, these are countries, these are individual voices. No matter how powerful a leader could become, they're an individual voice. And they have to entertain locations, areas, and states, quality aspects, and fact human nature itself as psychopaths with calmness and or when with aggression. But also relative to we have to appreciate exceptions too. Because all truths that appear to be a demonstration of other, all exceptions, they come with demonstration of the same thing. Forgiveness is because all that was is only capable of being. Otherwise, that body is sensed. At countries A through Z, including if that body is a majority of people, including if that body is everyone, including if there's any grouping of countries from this. See, we could have paid attention to details and changed the nature of the potential bottom slash S and the consequences of that with markets at countries A through Z. We had and have obligations to do such, but we can't do it when the nature of debate and the nature of conflicts are being used to screen the breaching method's roles. And nature itself is showing us there are collusions with all formal identities of the sciences, including the law, individually grouped and together. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names off corrections offices, judicial offices, and all natures of crime scenes, and with the prisons used to cover up their collusion slash S with location slash S use slash S. And when they use crimes, see, we could change this. I'm not even a lawyer. Nature itself, I could show you guys how nature's identity is showing us itself as what appreciates, as what has the identities of the law appreciating predicate acts, but now through an system tactical military from its own. While the law is appreciating predicate acts simultaneously, why and how English appreciates the predicate. And where the invisible slash hyper invisible, but still discernible, and where and how it is functional being that way, is functional that way. So this is also hyper intelligence that appreciates lists and ways that the names of the people of the sciences, including the identities of the law, cannot afford to have discerned. It shows that already consciously people left out exceptions, exception nature, when with readings of criminally of statutes. On a mass scale, the identities of the law know that originally and still their definitions of due process were our criminally foreign influenced while tactically delusions raw, while collusions slash hyper collusion, singular, know how there were distinct countries involved with slavery entrenched before America's founders were even born, northern colonies and southern colonies, and know how there were more than 13, and know how you guys have missed how James Madison, our founders behind him, is his plan. And James Madison, and George Washington. George Washington, however, first, we were supposed to be honest about his extortion. See, people are using the knowledge of good and evil to get over on ourselves. This is the most principled thing to understand. George Washington agreed to help James Madison and the founders behind him and his plan, which is to force the other third of America's founders, the Native Americans, that agreed, that were agreed with, and I agreed. In other words, we all agreed. We have been systems tactical terror from the one that is natural. In other words, all exception nature. That is natural when it's also still positive unto itself, the way nature shows us to reveal evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, solutions, and where and how we are fact-shaping nature too as quality, aspect, and ground location slash S. For its system that we were forced to not appreciate its hyperconjunction to the value of our short words, increasingly changed, increasingly courts. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprise for everyone, but distinctly, like they have to pretend they don't realize how their locations could have been and are, rules a whole bunch of predicate acts with facts, methods, needs, and natures of collusion slash S, with all natures of crime scenes, and with all natures of campuses, and with where and how there is recorded too that even the differences of that, of the campuses, and of the natures of the campuses, and of the locations, that is exploited too, where and how they're putting things to make it look like cross-reference true, are things that are not just lies and truths used for lies, into screen lies. But right where and how the breaching method keeps criminal and insidious natures of syntactical Boolean logic, positive and negative treatments, defended, where and how defenses of that can't defend itself without defending, exceptions and exception nature appreciated, tactical ulterior, from how nature shows us to appreciate it and to reveal the answers here. Like through time, how at cities where there are more murders, how they have collusion slash S with names involved with such, who are also insidiously involved with the locations and names, involved with less often in the suburbs murders, the same ones. Collusion slash S with names next to campuses, with identity theft, fraud, slanders affected by others, but no one follows the rules, and they're just being directed to act where the right to lie is used. S collusion slash S note with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, and with confessions. The breaching method used and uses confessions distinctly from nature, and since before religious messengers were even born, so distinctly from how the church uses confessions, no, but non-distinctly and simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously. But we haven't been afforded free speech to be able to prove things, and what has been proved by the science's names, there has been collusion slash S with influences from off those locations. Our founders communicated for us to understand how markets, threats, legitimate, in other words, all that are not an estimation of the difference of that. They can't be overcome until we address the breaching method's roles with markets and names A through Z. When people use the word hegemony, the breaching method is using you guys to sense for itself. And how, in other words, it is measured and maintained that countries A through Z don't have representation that is capable of addressing what is actually was and is actually recorded, principally, beginning with where and how replaced are what our founders communicated to us about the difference between James Madison as a founder and as a president. The experts have been using their knowledge of good and evil to want to test us about things that happened after that, because they have collusion slash S with influences from off all locations. And then further, 3 ways, at all location slash S. Then further with the database identities of relativity to ourselves into this. And further, where the campuses are manifest. The science, the names of the people of the sciences are manifest and exceptions, like with homeschooling. And identities of value slash value progression regarding, principles of treatments with that too. Measured and maintained identity theft, fraud, slanders, styles, needs, and natures, pretending others simultaneously. Otherwise, that body is sensed, including if that body is the majority of people, including if it's everybody. Psychiatry has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought takes on American history and rules and uses of their roles with IQ tests. President Trump. Thank God you did your homework with math. But everyone did homework or didn't do homework exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. As styles of logic, natures of logic, leaving itself as a scientific value out. And self-value while being you having been used remotely, wherein how that's also collusion slash as communicating other for James Madison and for our founders behind him and his plan. And they communicated for us to understand about how they didn't have free speech. There was a breaching method involved. It was entrenched, too sickly, through too many layers of hyper additional apparent and real motivations. I actually, even the real ones, and the difference of that used remotely by the breaching method. No one had slash has sophistication to discern, needing to be, needing to self value. Even non-sophistication and sophistication collusions, because it's a different collusions. Differences use tactical terror from how nature uses them. These are arrays of difference in sides of issues and exceptions that are collusions with a worse than shell game. Everyone's instead the breaching method reassigned what our founders communicated to us about that breaching method and about James Madison's plan. And they reassigned his communications about that, which is distinct from what he said. And they have roles self-valued using what our founders said, leaving out the breaching method, replacing it right from their communications, which is, again, distinct from what they said. And how people can be prevented. The laws, even if we pay attention to what the laws were valued as, they were a breaching method forcing people not to have free speech and simultaneously to pretend they have free speech anyway. It is recorded that President Trump and the president slash chiefs before him were shocked and awe about how to respond to this, where how they're supposed to respond to the news as good people, smart people, and make evidence as treatments, and or say bad but not be able to make the difference. Equality of fact, human nature is forced as criminal insidiousness slash hyper-criminal insidiousness, criminally foreign influence slash hyper-criminally foreign influence. But the only reason criminally foreign influence is because of the breaching method employed. Nature's demonstrations of everyone's hyper-criminal foreign influence. That distinct nature, like distinctly, the different countries have possessions of the colonists. We know this. But also sickly, non-distinctly, those countries were used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, here and there. And we know that all truths, we can observe how those truths regarding what caused that, they are being used for lies, have been used for lies. People have been pretending money was motivations behind slavery, to use that truth as a lie, to keep other things, others, ourselves, blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame on the human fact, human nature breaching method that was entrenched. We were not supposed to separate those crazy laws with that breaching methods roles with them from what witch trials are about. All exceptions, exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other, they come with demonstrations of the same thing and with lessons to us about how its identity is a distinct identity of exception nature. Again, we are what invented why and how we have two eyes. But that's just exceptions and exception nature and demonstration of the same thing. That how all these other species bodies have two eyes is in demonstration of how we have these quality aspects in nature. Nature's grouped, but also singularly, an identity of value slash value progression shared. Not one has carried the hypernative way, vaccines. So, in other words, all these countries have roles with intelligence families from Wethersfield involved with campuses, intercities, and interstates. And then further with employments of it, and as names also at all natures of crime scenes involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, also with spots and names and conversations tied to next to them, including next to campuses and corners of streets associated. A bunch of people who have been putting predicate acts with facts and databases, interstates, and with medical campuses. The recorded confess, demonstrate, confirm they have collusions with people involved with various natures of federal crimes in Wethersfield Police and FBI and courts with wire crimes, digital crimes. It has something to do with their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake exceptions planting, and faking completely at corners of streets next to campuses I went. Complete identity theft, fraud, slanders as time collusion slashes with a whole bunch of different countries and interbranch pretending passions and emotions at the same time. Then years later, linked use of people roles with that years before, planting illusions. In other words, fake motivations. They can't assert, in other words, so their databases involved with the predicate acts with facts methods that can be used to show that there are roles with names that have been using words like crimes as victims slash hyper victims. But if we address that, there's a quality of fact tribute nature, there's quality aspects of fact tribute, and fact tribute nature itself used to get over on ourselves. Everyone is forcing everyone else to be collusions, even leaders with criminal insidiousness natures of criminally foreign influence, psychopath natures of calm, syntax appreciation, subjects appreciation, or aggression, or the difference of it, or the array of emotion. Nature shows us that emotions, like everything else, is about the difference to, from, with, and as. To, from, as, with, and for. Each other difference is this hyper difference. That identity that is those three parts of time. We are shown in groups, like the value of seasons that are not even here yet. How it is only increasing as value here, or as it forced from here, as least of hadiths, and so eventually then death too, or extinction rather, of a special difference here as Earth. Through us, all exceptions, exception nature. Oh, it's this invasive fish, etc. In other words, that's because we have been systems tactical. Only humanity has been criminally foreign influence. Tactically delusions raw with communications and self-value roles with that. Right where people don't self-value roles with that, because the difference of that was it is also used. Where and how this preaching method has maintained that identity of hyper pseudo sophistication pretending other at locations, areas, and states relative to where and to how they have crazy people that leaders have to respond to, where and how they have border issues relative manifest. Meanwhile, this breaching method is exploiting where and how we are, where and how nature is communicating with cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall slash S in the body of invisible but still hyper invisible but still discernible. Coming through that, appreciating gases and its elements, water and its elements too, coming through. Those three physically manifest. Identities, plural of the singular identity of a cell, slash S, in the body of life is coming through. Ugh. All the plural parts of every individual party, every individual body are being generated by their individual identity, because of how every identity is that identity that is all things anyway, even if anything is made up. Its particular hypervolume science is inseparable from the individual finite, is inseparable from the grouped active, is inseparable from the simultaneous and or progressive. Three parts of itself grouped as that identity again, as those three parts of time. We know the extent of the past is true always. We know there's an extent reality right now, active, true always. And we know an extent of the future, like the seasons, true always. We are shown its body to an extent, singular, while we are shown parts of its body simultaneously too. And it looks like that because it's complete body. We're only discerning an extent of its complete volume science, which is complete identity relationship to itself is distinct. We're in how the same way your own identity is. It's your identity distinct as the tip of the finger of your fingernail or as a piece of your hair. It is distinct from your complete identity's complete identity, while non-distinct and simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. All things are in demonstration of the hyper invisible but still discernible, and how it is functional being hyper invisible but still discernible. Chief also alphabet decipher had to put it at ancientgamingsystem.com. But it's still counter obfuscated, just like Little Rap Guy and Friends, who I don't know, Reeves and Sepp remind me of you and Obama a lot, and Little Rap Guy reminds me of Romulus. Romulus and Remus is a science, just like the Republic is, reliant upon pantheism, but to see through isms in its own, to be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible, that which is true always, not denying the slightest sequence where let alone where and how wild a hyperforeign needs that to be done. Clearer than day, the hyperforeign has been present with our classes, where they appreciate or don't appreciate differences. They have black themed and white themed. There are people on with a I don't know their name. They're involved with, I don't know if they still live there, with a Victorian home on 2 Route Highway. And they have roles with intelligence family a bunch of ways through time, through a bunch of people that confess this tied to them. It's a federal crime to lie about such. These are also people involved with, I don't know, the state judicial branch officers and corrections officers with wire crime acts and methods and mail crimes, as collusions with all natures of crime scenes and names next to them, and with the news also in names next to the news and the difference of that. And as people with all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers and the courts at the same time. Again, news and other. It is recorded where and how they're keeping self-valid rules with mass identity theft, fraud, slander style of collusion /S, with all positive treatments syntactically appreciated and all negative treatments of all natures of that at all locations, areas, and states, exactly with the breaching method need to keep its identity of relativity to ourselves from being discerned, and or to keep roles used remotely shown needs to keep other things, others, ourselves blamed for nature's demonstrations and for our founders' demonstrations of it replaced, which is also hyper-evidential, which is also what having black pupils, whites of eyes, and left out from the subjects like slavery is hyper-evidential. People bring up the word hegemony being used to measure and maintain roles with all people, arrays and of differences, people that like each other now, the difference of that used to get over on. In other words, it is measure and maintain that countries A through Z have the imposition of a distinct nature of criminal foreign influences, so to speak, a hyper criminal foreign influences that is recorded. Like, for example, that's why and how different countries have possession of different colonies, and sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, they had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. The torture, extortion, slavery method, extortion method, and worse, that has to go around long to keep rolls with that. But sickly just non-distinctly to northern colonies and southern colonies, and then America's founders were born. This is not clear, not because people didn't do the homework. Because people that did do the homework, that had criminally foreign influence tactics delusions book, and the roles with the difference of them, or if they did their homework, or the difference of them and the people who didn't do the homework, that too was used remotely criminally foreign influence tactically delusions are where and how and when appreciated. We have means to discern. So forgiveness is because we have means to discern. All subject treatments came with demonstrations of remote uses of the fact human nature, quality aspects of nature of those people as collusion with predicate acts with facts. And them speaking about crimes anyway. For example, where and how this is manifest that countries individually grouped and together, but right where there are self-valued roles, right where no one self-values it, right where the breaching method needs those motivations in the nature of debate. The breaching method uses quality aspects of nature inside the nature of debate. See how everyone blamed the non-speech of President Biden, in other words, on mental issues, leaving out and forcing left out news collusion /S also with interbranch with experts on such. There's a Christina Sioka who is recorded involved with criminally foreign influence tactically delusions raw readings of the principles of American history that psychiatry had and has collusion /S with, and of reality regarding American history, regarding the principles of American history, beginning with James Madison, appreciation of him. But see, everyone else has these problems too, because sickly distinctly, you guys had other things, others ourselves. Blame for things James Madison communicated for us to blame in the breaching method, to blame how and why no one had free speech and everyone had to pretend other to an extent or be sensed by the breaching method and through our own per a method that for subject treatments and responses. This is one of the reasons we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, that are still, that's not appreciated. People pretend they don't realize by pretending their job is worth what it isn't. Then they invest people with their whole careers more and more. And then after they retire too, they have to pretend it's valuable. It wasn't. They had collusion /S way worse than they put people in jail for, even when they had collusions at the crime scenes, even framing people. Originally and still, that's what's recorded. That's what witch trials are about. You don't leave out how the witch trials are about the crazy laws against everyone with slavery entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies. And then America's founders were born. And then George Washington had to come and counter, extort, and force everyone to begin to be able to be founders and have to pretend other. Why? No one had the free speech to defend the Constitution unabridged. Even once they got it said for us to get the Constitution unabridged, even still. That's why and how they are manifested needing to forge names and switch names into branch. Needing to hide what is actually recorded. This breaching method never left. When did the witch trials not have to do with the three branches of government, and or the difference of the intelligence tied to them, and or their campuses, and or names next to anywhere they went and spoke, and the roles with the database relationship use of that. In other words, before they have people sent to jail, even when they're kids going to jail in New York City, the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. More and more, the lawns are mowed. We take away the stuff. The earth doesn't even have, maybe it's poisons too, by mixture, worms in it like it used to do. Everywhere. Now, in other words, worms used to walk into the puddles and then into bodies of water. In the rain, no, when the bugs are no longer going onto the surface of the water. When birds, all of a sudden they have less. Then they have less, they can't find as many bugs. All of a sudden the worms will come out. Nature communicates about positive and negative. Nature shows us its identity to an extent. Comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself, and only increasing value of that. As what we can appreciate here, or it is forced from here, as forced space nature transfer, as a negative identity of relationship to itself, as leaves of Hadith, as forced space nature transfer. I never read that. The other definitions of beliefs of Hadith are partially cipher/decipher. I mean, cipher to be deciphered. The religions are counterfronts, are doing damage control, but also still has collusion/S, because from off campuses have stayed forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, but self-value, because it have been used for collusion/S, not just there, the difference of there, anywhere else. In all natures of crime scene, increasingly have other names involved with what really is going down. And increasingly, in other words, words like control. Already the breaching method showed prosecutors and judges retired and standing there to hide how they pretended that to believe that people were just trying to use control. They use the word control, where they're putting fake things in databases. That's real sick natures of collusion/S. They don't even know the extent of. They know to an extent it's at least plausible, and they know to an extent it's true. They are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactical delusions wrong. The people who have used words like crimes. How could they, in other words, for example, all the names of the people of the sciences, at the same time, they were all recorded, how kept needing to hide the same past differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, illusions, roles. Increasingly active and shown needs to come. Also relative to where and how. Diversity and equity leaders could stay collusions against things so sacred, like anyone with black pupils, whites of eyes, that had that breaching method and has that breaching method still against them, especially those who hurt most sickly by that, like those in New York City, cities across the world, where how the suburbs are designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and people rely upon value nature systems means to get food and water through and as systems tactical terror. From what nature communicates with why and how we need food and water. We have forbid free speech, black pupils. Flank. Please, President Trump, through administrations, you guys were lied to. A Mike Pandol and a Ray Colello and others tied to them, like ones with the name Oliveri. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have all along Route 3 rolls of wire crimes, To an extent, they know that's the least plausible. With Weatherfield Police and with other intelligence and foreign and domestic criminal enterprises and private ones, and people with the name Jensen. I don't know Eric Jensen. I know former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. He's recorded capacity demonstrated confirmed. Also with Thaddeus Grabowski, involved with the people involved with an as John LeConch, and as neighbors of Eric Jensen, for him and others and Mike Pandolf and a Joe DeMore and a Ray Colello on Dearborn Street in Newington, Connecticut. They have rules of wire crime acts and methods with multiple police departments and their family members and retired police chiefs from Weathersfield who have involved with sexual and medical offenders of little kids, identity thefts and frauds, also with judges and prosecutors and their family members. And these are people with a whole bunch of different countries involved with the differences, racketeering, worse and war crimes. They have all kinds of medicines crimes with psychiatry and with their roles with narratives regarding economies, A through Z. You guys leave out how the economies are still criminally pointable / hyper criminally pointable because everyone had our founders' communications replaced. And the differences between campuses A through Z that was is used remotely too. This know how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same exact time. We are being shown the hyper difference, but we have this difference replaced. Facebook has roles with a bunch of people tied to who recorded capacity demonstrated confirmed. So I didn't want when you're a kid, you don't want to tell on people and especially girls. So strangers will say something, and you don't even know them, and then you'll never see them again. There are connections between people who do that, specifically with my neighbors tied to them, who have been planting evidences next to the colleges and universities I went, with people, including at campuses that I went that they didn't go. Like when I was in kindergarten, Ray Reynolds is increasingly involved with people, intelligence families that foreign and domestic, that have been planting evidence on all sides of my house with overt criminal enterprises, private ones too, and people that had time collusions with our campuses. These are not legitimate world. In other words, we can show. Nature shows us. It is a distinct identity of singular or identity of order. But the nature of itself, the further greater part of itself that is not, won't mix here, but does anyway. It's manifest in parts because we only have an extent of it distinctly from the extent of its complete identity, volume, as hyper-invisible but still discernible that we could discern. This is what we're discerning. In other words, predicate acting. I mean, the predicate act and the predicate were the science of sharing identity. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. They're grouped by the identity of the science of share. They are about fighting by the rules, but the rules have been abridged / hyper tactically abridged in some ancient times. So would that fight, fact, treatment, nature wise, would have produced, which is evolution's fruits, gifts, and means out of nowhere, everywhere at once, A through Z. Otherwise, we would discern a nature of sophistication even greater. In other words, we would discern, okay, that's a criminal disease, it's nature of positive, not really positive. We would have made evolution's fruits, gift, means out of nowhere with the hyper positive, hyper invisible, but still discernible. There's a distinct nature of positive shown to us by nature because positives can be used. Like criminal and says natures of positive. Truths can be used for lies, to screen lies, to cover up lies. We are styles needing to fight for using truth, leaving out the truth of the breaching method. This is why, in other words, the media is motivated to pretend that they're caring about a foreign citizen as a criminal or reported if it's true or not, being deported because they have roles against American citizens with the same overt criminal enterprises and terrorists involved with differences racketeering worse than war crime. Increasingly, there's a Daryl Chandler and people tied to him who will tell you he was influenced to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and me fake use drinking by having my neighbor have asked me to hold a cup for a second, a Ray Colello. Increasingly, people tied to a Ray Colello and a Joe DeMoro trying to frame me for drinking. I didn't even drink. I had like one sip of one when I was in eighth grade. They're trying to put fake ties to me with a judge, Jennifer Smith, involved with some judges and prosecutors, including a Judge Smith, a Judge Killian, involved with various natures of federal criminals, with various of little boys and girls, with their family members too, including ones with the name Della Fera, or I believe named Della Fera. Maybe it was a relative with a different last name. But there's a Della Fera family who's one of the men involved with their families and their kids who have been with others. I don't even know the names of. So I had to call him years later because I figured out his name. I don't even know his names of his sons except for two of them. But they have roles of other probate court judges, family members, and superior courts judges, family members, and Connecticut District Court, and in other words, involved with the same house / S with wire crimes with Weathersfield police, forging and switching names, and with retired police chiefs and their intimate ties, foreign and domestic military. In other words, a whole bunch of people tied to a Kevin Dillon and a Ray Colello, and people with the name Walters, with sexual and medical offenders of kids that are further with their family members, with the schools and the town offices, involved with in other words, with also medicines crimes, with Hartford Hospital, and with police forums that are supposed to be countering drugs crimes, but they have been medicines crimes, which are drug crimes, and they have rules with the drugs and the unmarked police forms involved with them with differences rackets, also with the names next to religious spots. And like there's a Riley family that sought me out when I was in an algebra class with her to confess and demonstrate, record. She was going to plant evidences with her religion and the religion of a girl she repeated sexual things about who lives near me and brought up her religion. It has increasingly to do with their roles with fire campuses and with medical campuses and with child campuses where they're with all kinds of natures of drugs and medicines crimes and people tied to them like sociology and stuff. They're putting fake and changed recorded reality into databases. They're measuring and they're using truths for lies too on a mass scale as time collusion slashes with a whole bunch of different countries and overt criminal enterprises and private ones. These are people involved with Afghan leaders and kids, involved with American leaders and kids, and all these other countries too, as the ones with Korea, Italy, involved time collusion / S with spots and names next to where the Weathersfield Police Department is now, and names at the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. Mike Roberts, he sought me out. I never saw him out. They tried to make a fake exception. One time, Eric Jensen drove up to his house to make a fake exception to pretend other with. Mike Roberts and Eric Jensen have interstates with Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I don't know, in Connecticut, and Washington D.C. people involved with educators of a Mike Roberts, involved with identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts, families all along Route 175 from founding locations, and all along Route 3, which is conjunctive to the state judicial branch offices. Roles of people with predicate acts on my streets from other areas, on my street from other areas through time, with people involved with the police departments involved switching and forging names and refusing to get on paper to one name in sequence, Increasingly, these are people involved with the names like Colello and Demar, who have predicate acts on my streets through time with the police forging and switching names with the courts doing the same, lying about their motivations with their family members, people tied to them, planting fake ties, fake natures, ties to me on my street. Now, these are also people forcing groupthink, to use a phrase of Donald Rumsfeld, as reported through CNN. CNN's YouTube, I mean CNN social media, like their Facebook page. It was his recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with intelligence families involved with Connecticut courts, involved with them at and next to Central Connecticut State University, with syntax and subject treatments, criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions, raw, as collusions with people from Russia and Ukraine, at the same time with the ones from Korea, Italy, um, Asian countries, Arabic countries. In other words, Saudi Arabia has rules with Central Connecticut State University and with Harvard courts and the Britain courts, families, and intimate ties. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed things that were also confessed and recorded by intelligence families from Wethersfield regarding their roles. Like there's a Lucinda, I think her name was Alderuccio. I believe she's married to a Kalvinskis who wasn't even in my grade. Increasingly, people involved with people that intelligence families that used to live in my area, and their extended family members from other areas, and one's still here. And increasingly involved with predicate acts with police departments and fire departments, and their roles with a bunch of natures of criminally foreign influence uses of campuses like Harvard Hospital, also with the businesses and houses next to Harvard Hospital, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and then pretending it's their roles legitimately with unmarked police forms caring about that. They're confessing it while pretending other and refusing to get on paper. So even with silence now, they're leaking things. These are also with a Violet family has rules with that girl who was reportedly dragged to her death. Who, even if that was made up, that girl's involved with them. I never met her personally. I saw her and was from next to Harvard Hospital with Mike Violet or Mark Violet, and also again Demorals Market that used to be there, and other businesses associated with them, which is not far from Harvard Hospital now, which is also not far from Buckley High School and Iola's Kitchen. I don't know if Iola's Kitchen is still there. It's also like three businesses in one. But the Iola family is also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed intercities next to the campuses, including with the people next to Harvard Hospital involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and mayors, like former mayors, with child abuses of kids and other natures of federal evidences crimes with them, including with people involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced years apart, and people involved with differences, racket, pretending passions and emotions for why they don't like people too, to pretend that they even had conversations with or know them. They do little tricks to make fake exceptions. Increasingly, people with a name, with tied to former mayors from Wethersfield, have collusions with whiting forensics too, with the Saudi attackers, and with other natures of federal crimes and body dumping spots and predators before they got caught. They had collusions with them, and they've been using all that comes before them as the identities of the law and tied to them to hide to use that to hide what is actually recorded and as their value as it is actually recorded and as the value of their words regarding emotions or what they appear to perceive. Emotions, nature shows us, are about the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous or it being ignored. In other words, they serve a function that we are prohibited free speech to appreciate it And we are forced to pretend we have free speech anyway. Otherwise, that body is sensed, just like it was originally instilled. So this is why how they're pretending they don't realize they're pretending they have morality towards a foreign person, even if it wasn't a foreign reported serious bad person, dangerous person. They're pretending they care when they have recorded collusion /S with all kinds of natures of sustained tortures, extortion, in fact, human nature of slavery, therefore physically of Americans. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, with internationally monitored conversations regarding not even allowed to discuss it outside of them, as well as the torture, extortion, slavery method. We're not even allowed to speak about, even though our founders communicated for us not to leave it out. Vaccines, extra things belong.